We'll call to order the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology, and I want to say from the day that the administration announced the intent to transition the IANA functions, this subcommittee has been committed to oversight of the transition process and ensuring that there are appropriate safeguards in place to improve the odds of a successful transition and preserve the Internet as we all are committed to protecting. Since that time, we've held multiple hearings on this topic and heard from many perspectives. We've passed the original DOTCOM Act out of the full committee more than a year ago, a bill that would have required NTIA to pause until for 1 year while GAO completed a report. Though there was disagreement about that bill's approach at the time, over the past year, we have continued our examination of this issue and remained committed to finding a workable solution. At our May hearing on IANA transition, all of our witnesses were in agreement that there is a role for Congress to play in the transition. Exercising our oversight of NTIA, we have the ability to ensure that any transition proposal is fully vetted and that a robust discussion takes place prior to the hands-off of the IANA functions. While NTIA works within its proper role in the multi-stakeholder model, we too are working within our proper role as oversight authority. Given the feedback from our hearings and through productive negotiations with our Democratic counterparts, especially want to thank the ranking member, Mr. Pallone, for his efforts, we have formulated a bipartisan piece of legislation that acknowledges congressional oversight while respecting the multi-stakeholder community's process. The substitute amendment we are considering today is a sensible and reasonable path forward. We continue to have strong interest in avoiding the potential harmful outcomes of this transition, and this is an important step toward that goal. In addition to this legislation, last year we asked the Government Accountability Office to complete a report on the impact of the proposed transition. Specifically, we requested that they look at risks associated with the transition, commitments that exist in the current ICANN contract, and any additional criteria that NTIA should consider when evaluating the proposal. We look forward to reviewing that report this summer and hope to see their findings considered as part of the transition process. Throughout this process, we've done our best to be cognizant of the impact and appearance of our actions on the international stage. We recognize these considerations, but we also feel it would be irresponsible to ignore the very real risks associated with relinquishment of the U.S. role in Internet governance, no matter how symbolic. This is why we've taken the measured approach we will discuss today. NTIA put forward a set of criteria that they say any acceptable transition proposal must meet, all of which are essential to ensuring a vibrant Internet should NTIA transition IANA to the multi-stakeholder community. NTIA should be applauded for this and for its willingness to stick to these criteria despite the difficulty in meeting them. Our goal through this legislation and our efforts in the subcommittee is to ensure that these conditions are met and that the myriad of unforeseen complications are addressed. In addition to the original 4 criteria, NTIA added the requirement that ICANN must improve its accountability to the Internet community. This bill addresses this by requiring NTIA to certify that the changes put forth by the multi-stakeholder community, multi-stakeholder accountability group have been implemented. A strong and accountable governing body is a necessary prerequisite for a tenable long-term successor to the U.S. government's stewardship. I believe that if it is signed into law by the President, this bipartisan legislation represents an alternative to a funds limitation that would achieve our shared goal, that is, preventing harm to the Internet as we know it. Ensuring an oversight role for Congress adds another check to this process and emphasizes that the United States takes this transition seriously. I thank my Democratic colleagues for working with us and Mr. Shimkus for his tireless efforts and thoughtful work on this issue last year. With that, I would recognize my friend from California, the ranking member of the subcommittee, Ms. Eshoo, for opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the past 2 decades, U.S. policy through Republican and Democratic administrations have supported the transition of the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, IANA, to the private sector. In conjunction with this support has been a long-standing and bipartisan commitment by Congress to a global open Internet free from governmental control. The agreement reached today carries on this bipartisan tradition by ensuring that the IANA transition supports and enhances the multi-stakeholder model of Internet governance, maintains the security, the stability, and the resiliency of the Internet domain name system, and does not replace the role of the NTIA with a government-led or intergovernmental organization solution. These core principles have enabled the growth of the Internet as an unparalleled platform for economic opportunity and democratic participation. In carrying out the IANA transition, I wholeheartedly agree with my colleagues that there must be built-in mechanisms for transparency and accountability, and a commitment by ICANN to resist any expansion of the role governments or intergovernmental organizations may play in ICANN's deliberations. Members on both sides of the aisle have stated their support for these principles, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute ensures that there is a mechanism in place for public review before the transition is completed. I thank Chairman Walden and Congressman Shimkus for working with my staff to craft a legislative proposal that promotes transparency, accountability, and reaffirms our commitment to the IANA transition. I think this is something that colleagues on both sides of the aisle can support in the amendment that's in the nature of a substitute, which is a vote to carry out the extraordinary success story that is the Internet, ensuring that billions of people around the world will continue to benefit from everything it has to offer. So with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady yields back the balance for time. The members on our side of the aisle, the Vice Chair of the Committee, Mr. Latta, is recognized for, I think, 1 minute.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding this markup today. The bill before us today and the soon-to-be proposed amendment introduced by my friend, the gentleman from Illinois, seeks to preserve the Internet's openness and freedom by ensuring proper oversight of the U.S. government's role in the Internet's numbering functions during its transition to a global multi-stakeholder community. While I support this transition, I also want to make sure that it's properly executed and meets the standards established by the NTIA. That's why I support the DOTCOM Act. This bill ensures that NTIA's responsibilities over the Internet's domain name system function will not be relinquished until evaluation and analysis of the transition are conducted and reported by the GAO. By placing safeguards on this transition, Congress can better maintain our national security and should continue to allow citizens fully to navigate the Internet. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Pallone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our ranking member, Ms. Eshoo, also. Today's markup is an example of what this committee can accomplish when we work in a truly bipartisan manner, and I want to thank you and Representative Shimkus for working with the Democrats to find a smart solution that works for everyone. Republicans and Democrats in Congress have long been united in our support for the multi-stakeholder model of Internet governance. For 3 decades, the U.S. government has been moving towards greater private sector management of the domain name system, and the transition of the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, or IANA, is a continuation of our commitment to the privatization of the domain name system first initiated in the 1990s. The stakes for this transition are high because the Internet is such a central part of the global economy and society. But if it's done right, the billions of people around the world that use the Internet shouldn't even notice. The National Telecommunications and Information Administration has laid out clear principles for the transition in keeping with our commitment to the multi-stakeholder model and an open global Internet. Congress's job is to make sure that NTIA lives up to these commitments. I believe the working groups convened by the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, ICANN, are moving in the direction of these goals, and we must ensure that ICANN remains accountable after NTIA's stewardship role ends. The bipartisan substitute amendment to the DOTCOM Act that we're offering today does just that. We're conducting the necessary and appropriate congressional oversight of NTIA while renewing our commitment to an Internet free from governmental control. I believe the DOTCOM Act is a better alternative to placing funding restrictions on NTIA that prevent the agency from implementing the transition. I urge all my colleagues to support the substitute amendment. I also encourage our colleagues in the Senate to move quickly and get this bill to the President's desk. A vote for the DOTCOM Act is a vote for a responsible IANA transition and the continued success of the free and open Internet. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of time. Chair recognizes the author of this legislation, who's done incredible work on it, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Personal thanks to you for your help and support. I appreciate it. And to Ranking Member Pallone and Ranking Member Eshoo, you are right. This has been a long-standing bipartisan movement on this transition, and I think we're at a better place with your help, and I want to thank you for that. I want to give my thanks also to David Goldman and David Rettel, Margaret McCarthy, and my own Greta Joins for their work, because they're the ones hashing out the deals and talking the language, and we couldn't do it without you. This has always been about oversight and our proper role, having oversight of the NTIA. This is a big deal, and we, if we don't get it right, we've lost it. And so that's for those of us who've been trying to make sure we took measured steps. That was our intent. And again, as I said, I think we're in a better place. I want to thank my colleagues for their support, and I look forward to moving the legislation. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Matsui.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of this bipartisan compromise we're considering today. In 2012, with strong bipartisan congressional backing, the administration's position was strengthened in reaffirming the current multi-stakeholder approach that has allowed the Internet to flourish here in the United States and around the world. Congress must stay united moving forward. I am pleased that we are continuing to stay united and demonstrate to the international community that we will not support any proposal that undermines the openness of the Internet. With over 2 billion users, the Internet has become a necessity, not a luxury. It plays a dominant role in the world economy. We need to continue to promote innovation and openness of the Internet around the globe. That has been the hallmark of U.S. policy. I believe the multi-stakeholder approach must continue to define Internet governance. I support this bipartisan compromise, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. Chair now recognizes the Vice Chair of the full committee, Ms. Blackburn, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and Mr. Shimkus and all the staff members who have been involved in a bipartisan compromise and on this amendment. I think all of us are very concerned about what we see happening with ICANN and with the IANA contract. We need that checklist of items that have to be done right before there is further discussion. So we're pleased with this. One of the things that does concern me about ICANN is the registries and the registrars, that they're not abiding by the current provisions in their own public interest commitments and the registrar accreditation agreement. And these contractual agreements were created through the multi-stakeholder process, and under them, ICANN, the registries, and the registrars must prohibit domain name holders from engaging in illegal activity and must investigate the violations that they think are there or that are found to be there in those claims. And before we sign off on the transition, it is an imperative that we tend to these items. I thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlelady. Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, for opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an important issue. It's critical to keep the Internet free and open. And I want to thank the Chairman and Mr. Shimkus and others that were involved in the process. And I want to say that this is the way things are supposed to run. Principles were laid out, bipartisan cooperation ensued, and we have something that we can agree on. People back home, when they watch TV, they say, you guys can't get anything done. Well, I'll tell you what, we're getting stuff done right here in this committee. This is an example. Century 21 Cures is another example. Pay attention, folks. Things are getting done here in Washington. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Actually, I'd like you to continue on. I'd ask unanimous consent for another 5 minutes. Now we'll go to let's see, Mr. Guthrie's not here. Let's go to Mr. Kinzinger for, nope. Mr. Bilirakis, nope, he waves. Mr. Johnson, opening comments. Mr. Pompeo, opening comments. Ms. Elmer's opening comments. Mr. Collins, nope, nope. Anyone else? Okay. Well, with that, oh, Mr. Lance. No, he stepped out, and Mr. Guthrie's out. Okay. Then the chair now calls up H.R. 805 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 805, to prohibit the National Telecommunications and Information Administration from relinquishing responsibility over the Internet domain name system until the Comptroller General of the United States submits to Congress a report on the role of the NTIA with respect to such systems.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. Chair now recognizes Mr. Shimkus for the purpose of offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 805 offered by Mr. Shimkus, Mr. Walden, Mr. Pallone, and Ms. Eshoo.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is now dispensed with. The chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes in support of the amendment, but I would actually yield to the gentleman from Illinois, other than to thank again my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for their good work in this effort. I think I'll let my opening statement stand and yield to Mr. Shimkus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't take very much time either. Most of the stuff was mentioned. I'm always concerned when you say strike after an enacting clause, which means you're writing a whole new bill and you're placing something in, which is really what we've done. We look at the requirements laid out by the NTIA. We said we have a significant role in doing that. I think the other add was these other groups that are involved in ensuring a transition. We're gonna have also a look at that. I think that's going to be very, very helpful. One of the big things to remember too is we didn't want the contract to lapse. And I think when we had the hearing, most people were concerned about the contract lapsing, and then there'd be more disarray. So, again, I thank my colleagues for helping and joining us, Congresswoman Eshoo and Congressman Pallone for their support, and you, Chairman, for leading us on our merry way. And with that, I yield back our time.
Gentleman yields back. Anyone else seeking recognition in support of the amendment or opposition? Seeing none. If there are no more amendments, the vote now occurs on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. 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 All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The question now occurs on forwarding H.R. 805 as amended to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the bill is favorably reported. Without objection, the staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes to the legislation approved by the subcommittee today, so ordered. Again, I want to thank our colleagues for their great work on this measure. I think it's important for the country, and another great bipartisan movement forward for our subcommittee. Without objection, the subcommittee now stands adjourned.